You're a gambler, right? I was thinking about doing some gambling myself. You know, just a little bit of money. Maybe doubling it and doubling it several more times. Do you have any tips or ideas about sure things? There are 10 rules that you need to learn. Number 1, you need to play to win, but you also have to win to play.
Boom, 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 boom.
It's the Everyone Gets a Trophy football podcast presented by the Yelpy Yinzer. Wherever you may be listening and however you may be listening, thank you for making us part of your day. It was a fun 2017, maybe not as many podcasts as we originally hoped, but the picks were still available on Twitter at Trophy Podcast. But first, let's give credit where credit is due. Super producer Howard, follow him on Twitter at NFL_DVOA_picks. He does it all. He combines all that information. This isn't a partial podcast stealing information, plagiarizing from just one source. He's using it all. The Football Outsiders, the Sharps, Pro Football Focus, Our Lads, everything. Watches the Game Pass, watches the film, watches it again. He's the one who comes up with all this, sits down and does all the hours and makes it easy for me to read it off in 10 minutes. So thank you, Howard. With that, let's begin. The 2017 Philadelphia Eagles finished 13-3 on the way to their first Super Bowl championship. They did it all with all kinds of adversity in their face, including Carson Wentz going down with that ACL injury when they were playing the Rams in Los Angeles. Now, a lot of people thought that was maybe the end of their season. They're familiar with Nick Foles from the Chip Kelly era, but no one in their right mind expected what they would go on to accomplish. That's right, Nick Foles takes the team to the Super Bowl, wins the MVP, and guess what, folks? He's back to back up Carson Wentz in 2018. A lot of people thought maybe, the draft comes along, got all this equity with the Super Bowl MVP, maybe trade him off to another team. Nah, they're going to hang on to him, see how this thing rides out, at least through camp. Obviously, injuries happen, and maybe we could even see that trade similar to what we saw with Sam Bradford a couple years back to open the door for Carson Wentz. But in 2018, we're rolling in with two quarterbacks. Big thing to watch for in 2018 is the healing of that knee. A big part of Carson Wentz's offense in 2017 was his ability to extend plays, specifically on third and long situations. The Eagles converted on 48% of third and longs compared to a league average of 29%. Big gap there, not necessarily a sustainable plan going into 2018. However, it is important to note the Eagles were one of the best third down teams and even better on third and long, despite ranking just 13th overall on first down and 20th overall on second down. One other thing to note is even when the Eagles maybe failed on those third and long situations, it created a lot of fourth and short opportunities the Eagles then converted. Let me reiterate, not necessarily a sustainable plan to continue trying to convert. However, in a copycat league, maybe look out for all these coaches to start saying, I don't know if I'm going to play it safe here on fourth and down, and going for it when they're near midfield, much like the Eagles in their Super Bowl winning season. Fun fact about Doug Peterson, going back the last 30 years, Doug Peterson ranked third of all those coaches in the last 30 years, going for it 22 times in 2017. If you're wondering, Bill Parcells in 1996 went for it 27 times, and in 2007 with the Jaguars, Jack Del Rio went for it 26. After that, sitting Doug Peterson. A lot of other big names on this list, guys, from Parcells, obviously, Belichick, to Mike Ditka, too. Look at that. Also returning on the offensive side of the ball, Jason Peters returns at left tackle. Now, a lot of fun reads on the internet about this. Lane Johnson, obviously, people thought maybe could have moved from right to left in 2017 when Jason Peters went down with that injury. Vaitai locked it down on the left side. Lane Johnson continued to lock it down on the right side. Why didn't they switch? I think Josh Sitton best summed this up, commenting on when he had to make the switch in 2013, quote, I can compare it to trying to wipe your ass with the opposite hand. Might be a little bit too much for y'all, but it's different when you're not used to the position switching. So, for all you folks out there who want to really get into the mind of an offensive lineman, next time when you're sitting there pooping, perhaps listening to this podcast, try to wipe with your left hand and see how that goes for you. In addition to the awkwardness of switching over, Lane Johnson was an absolute beast on the right side of the line. The NFL's changed, people. No longer a defense is loading up that blind side and trying to attack the quarterback from behind. They're putting the guy right in your face on that right side coming after you. Going back to 2017, guys Lane Johnson lined up with. Let me see if you recognize any of these names. Ryan Kerrigan, Joey Bosa, Justin Houston, Jason Pierre-Paul, Von Miller, Michael Bennett, Khalil Mack. Yeah, premier edge rushers are lining up on that right side coming after the quarterback. All those guys combined for 87 total sacks in 2017. In the games Lane Johnson was protecting the quarterback, he didn't allow a single sack. We're seeing it all over the NFL. The right tackle position is going to become more and more important. If you're with us a few years ago, Howard pointed out, Von Miller on Mike Remmers is going to be a disaster. That's why we're taking the Broncos. Sure enough, Von Bell all over Cam Newton. Sure enough, the Broncos won that Super Bowl. We won it with them. So when you crack up a Madden in a few weeks, folks, and you're building that dominant franchise, take a look at that right tackle and see who's playing there. Maybe that's the position you want to start upgrading right away. Also on the offensive side of the ball, LeGarrette Blount no longer with the team. The Eagles still do have Jay Ajayi, a running back they acquired mid-2017. Obviously, Corey Clement will be there for the third down role. Darren Sproles is going to come back after previously saying he was going to retire after last season. That injury, he's going to come back for one more year, potentially replacing the LeGarrette Blount big body role. The Eagles tried to strike gold again on an undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame, their leading rusher Josh Adams. Also to point out, I was rewatching the Super Bowl. Early play in the game, Nick Foles fakes the handoff to Jay Ajayi. Al Michaels calls it an RPO. Now, the Eagles made the RPO famous in 2017. You're going to hear all kinds of announcers going after it saying RPO, RPO, RPO. An RPO and a play action are not necessarily the same thing. If the offensive line takes a step forward, that's a run block. If there's a fake handoff behind that, that's your RPO. That's your run pass option. The quarterback has the opportunity to maybe hand off to the running back, and the line will then be in position to block the run. Now we're seeing quarterbacks pull the ball out and then maybe even take off themselves or make a secondary pass, but it is called an RPO because the line is blocking for a run. On this particular play in the Super Bowl, when the ball is snapped, line drops back, pass protection, fake handoff, trying to bring in the safeties, get them to bite, maybe open up something down the field. That is a play action. So two different plays, all really just look at the line, you'll see exactly what they're running. So you can kind of feel like a hard ass in the room when you see the lines moving backward and there's a fake handoff. The announcer says RPO, you can call him a liar. Speaking of targets, Alshon Jeffrey's back. They acquired him from the Bears last season, went on to re-sign him to a bigger deal. Big target, big deal. We'll see what he can do, continuing to be that guy for Carson Wentz. Torrey Smith's out, Mike Wallace is in. Now, if you're like me, the common man here, you're probably thinking, there's two obscure random receivers out there. Pro Football Focus graded Torrey Smith as a 46. Mike Wallace, 74.5. So some pretty significant improvement here. Digging deeper, you notice Torrey Smith dropped 11.6% of his passes. Now, this issue is prevalent with all the Eagles receivers in 2017. A lot of drop balls. That's the place they're going to aim for some improvement in 2018. But they've already gone a step ahead and maybe getting rid of one of the guys that was dropping all those balls. Other receivers, Mac Hollins. We saw him blow up in the preseason last year. We saw in the Redskins Monday Night Football game, he was doing the backpack boy dance. The Eagles think he may be part of the bigger plan. I say this because they hired Gunter Brewer, wide receiver coach out of UNC. That's the same wide receiver coach that Mac Hollins had all his success with in college. Gunter Brewer, quite the pedigree, going back even before he was at UNC. He coached Justin Blackman and Dez Bryant at Oklahoma State. Dez Bryant's still a free agent. I'm not saying the Eagles need a receiver. Maybe connect the dots a little bit. Dez Bryant, Gunter Brewer, reunite in Philadelphia. Wouldn't be crazy. If you need any more on Gunter Brewer's resume, let me throw out that he also coached Randy Moss at Marshall. So put all these pieces together. Maybe the Eagles are saying a lot of opportunity here for Mac Hollins to be a big-time threat in the NFL. The final position group we're going to look at real quick here is the tight end position. Tight end position made all kinds of noise in the Super Bowl. Trey Burton. I got the text from Howard right before the game. Trey can throw. Now, you don't have to believe me. I have the screenshot to prove it. My brother, for example, still shocked that this happened the way it did. Trey Burton threw. Philly special. Touchdown. Granted, he's now a Chicago Bear and Brett Selleck's no longer with the team. However, the Eagles killed it in the draft going after Dallas Goedert of South Dakota State. Pro Football Focus rated him as the top tight end in the class. At South Dakota State, he was often used as a receiving threat. Came on the map when they played a lot of the FBS teams, obviously South Dakota State being an FCS team. Not a lot of tape on him, you'd think, but because he played so well against the higher competition, he jumped out to them, they went back and graded him, and he ended up being the number one tight end ahead of guys like Mike Gesicki. Nice big target, 6'5", 255, playing behind Zach Ertz would be a great opportunity for Dallas to become the next big threat. Pro Football Focus compared him to a younger Jason Witten. Granted, Eagles fans hate the Cowboys, but if they're being honest with themselves, I think they'd be happy to see a guy like Jason Witten available at tight end.
Expect to see a lot of 12 personnel packages from the Eagles this year.
Moving those guys around. We saw Goddard play some slot in college. Another opportunity to move tight ends outside off the line into those receiving roles, creating big targets in red zone and third down situations. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, big addition from the Seattle Seahawks. Michael Bennett comes over, replacing Vinny Curry. Now, Michael Bennett does a lot of the same things Vinny Curry does, if not better. The key thing here for Michael Bennett is he has another option to move inside the line on those obvious passing situations, deploying that rush man option, 4 defensive ends on the field at one time, attacking that quarterback. Going back to 2017, the Eagles allowed 0 points in the final 2 minutes, in large part because they were able to deploy all those defensive ends just attacking the quarterback downfield. We saw it in the Super Bowl. Brandon Graham attacks the quarterback, swats the ball out of Tom Brady's hands, ultimately helps the Eagles seal up that victory. The Eagles also made a big splash in the draft out of Florida State, drafting Josh Sweat in the 4th round. Could be the steal in the draft, a guy who was one of the top-rated pass rushers coming out of college. Maybe not necessarily strong in the run game, but coming out in the 4th round, I think the production you're going to get out of him, specifically in deploying those rush man packages with all those defensive ends on the field at one time, will certainly be another asset to look for in that position group that's already probably one of the strongest in the leagues. Key return number 3. We've already mentioned Carson Wentz. We've already mentioned Jason Peters. Jordan Hicks returns back on the defensive side of the ball. In the linebacker position group, while Nigel Bradham will miss week 1 due to suspension, the Eagles played nickel in 70% of downs in 2017. So those 2 guys will lock down that position group. On the outside, Patrick Robinson will need to be replaced. Played very well in 2017. The Eagles drafted Vontae Maddox out of Pitt, a shorter DB, potentially sized up for that slot role. More importantly, go back to the 2017 draft, Sidney Jones fell to them in round 2. Prior to his Achilles injury at Washington, he was graded out as one of the best DBs coming into that draft. Falls to the Eagles in the 2nd round. If he's able to recover from that Achilles injury, we're talking about a 1st-round talent the Eagles got for value. Malcolm Jenkins is also back. Mr. Do-It-All for this Eagles defense. Safety, cornerback, nickelback, plays a little linebacker. In the box, outside the box, pass, run, all over the field, strengthening that unit. Projecting forward, the over-under for the Philadelphia Eagles this season is 10. They went 13-3 in 2017. We're projecting maybe even a 12-4, worst case scenario, 11-5 record in 2018. Listen, I know, dynasties aren't built in 2 years, but the Eagles have all the pieces to sustain success in the NFL, even if they don't win in 2018. So they got a healthy Carson Wentz and plenty of tools around him. Doug Peterson, can't believe I'm saying this, one of the great offensive minds coaching in the NFL these days, and Jim Schwartz on defense, who will likely be in position for a head coaching job after this season. A lot of resources here. Eagles 12-4 is what we are projecting. Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. America's team went 9-7 in 2017. However, we're going to throw an asterisk on that. They're probably only a 500 team. Did the Eagles throw them a free win in week 17? Maybe. The story all year was Ezekiel Elliott. Is he suspended? Is he playing? Suspended? Playing? He showed up fat week 1. Didn't look like his 2016 self. Gets suspended, goes to Mexico. 6 weeks later, comes back, and he looks like that Buckeye great running back. The other key cog in the Dallas Cowboys wheel, Dak Prescott. Another quarterback on a rookie deal. This is the time to strike in the NFL. We saw it last year with the Eagles. We saw it last year and even in the offseason with the Rams, spending that money on other resources. We saw it even back when the Seahawks won their Super Bowl. Russell Wilson, rookie deal, money going to guys on the Legion of Boom. Unfortunately for the Cowboys, while they have a quarterback on a rookie deal, they also are sitting on $24 million of dead cap, second only to the Buffalo Bills. $9 million of that's going to Tony Romo at CBS. I don't know, Jim. I don't know, maybe. They don't have Jason Witten anymore. Dead money with Dez Bryant. They're 32nd in spending at the quarterback, tight end, and defensive back positions. More on that later. Back to Jason Witten and Dez Bryant. They were responsible for 33 of Dak Prescott's targets in the red zone in 2017. Going to need to find a way to replace those targets. Ezekiel Elliott should be back in his form. In 2017, the Cowboys averaged 24.4 points with Zeke versus 18.3 without. So that touchdown difference, obviously, again, Ezekiel Elliott is a big part of this offense. Bigger part potentially could be Tyron Smith. We'll get to him later. They went 1-3 without him. So maybe the offensive line health is going to be an underrated piece to this offense. Back to Zeke, 144 yards per game with Ezekiel Elliott running back, 121 running without him. One thing to consider with Ezekiel Elliott is he's never really been used effectively in the passing game, strictly a running back. If they can find ways to use Ezekiel Elliott in that passing game, they could potentially make up for the losses of Dez Bryant and Jason Witten. Bottom line again, you need to find a way to let Dak throw the ball. In 2017, Dak Prescott was the 32nd ranked passer throwing the deep ball. Not ideal. And you know, Dak Prescott's going to have to find a way to do it pretty much on his own. Right now, they've got $24 million in dead cap money. Going forward, Stephen Jones has already promised Dak that $100 million contract at the end of this season, so there's not going to be those resources for guys at wide receiver. They still tried to get crafty. They brought in Allen Hurns, which is odd given he played 70% of his snaps last year in the slot. Cowboys already have Cole Beasley doing rather well from the slot, so there's going to be a little of a conflict there. Terrence Williams will be back, might be suspended, we'll find out there. The big addition I think here is Deontay Thompson. If you look, a very reliable deep threat who may be able to help improve Dak's ranking from 32nd. One more addition, Tavon Austin they brought in, not really sure. Is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? Does Scott Linehan even know how to use him? Speaking of Scott Linehan, one of the only offensive coordinators to actually get booed in his home stadium. He was able to turn a 1st and goal into 2 with a missed field goal. I mean, you look at these Cowboys coaching staff, Scott Linehan, Rod Marinelli, the Clapper, Jason Garrett. Are they even really good enough to succeed in the NFL? Who knows? Additional targets. Jason Witten got to replace him. They drafted Dalton Schwartz out of Stanford. Pro Football Focus loved him. Rico Gather last year was a preseason hero. He could be a fantasy sleeper. Back to that offensive line. I think that's the real story here. Tyron Smith missing time. The Cowboys last season went 1-3 without him. They never scored more than 12 points in those games. We all remember that blunder in Atlanta. Chaz Green allowed Adrian Claiborne 6 sacks in the game, keeping Tyron Smith healthy, keeping him on the field. Positive blocking for Ezekiel Elliott, protecting Dak Prescott. That's going to be the key for the Cowboys offense in 2018. Taking a look at the rest of that line, Zach Martin's still around. Travis Frederick's one of the best centers. Lyle Collins playing that right tackle position. Obviously, we mentioned Lane Johnson, how important it was for the Eagles on right tackle. I think Lyle Collins could maybe be the weakness at defensive attack on that right side. They drafted Connor Williams, a guard out of Texas. If he can stay healthy, which he couldn't necessarily do at Texas, but if he stays healthy at the Cowboys, he could pay off. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball. Franchise tag DeMarcus Lawrence, another disruptor in the backfield, strong player there. Tackle David Irving, very consistent. Let me tell you about consistency, people. 2017, he takes a 4-game suspension. 2018, how about another 4-game suspension? He's not even reporting to camp. Today, the news breaks that he can't even find a babysitter. Maybe the issue, not showing to the camp. Moving on to linebackers, Sean Lee. I mentioned when we kick the show off, we wait to give our picks out till Sunday when we see the active list of players. Sean Lee, by far, is one of the biggest drivers of leans I've ever seen us make. If Sean Lee's inactive, chances are that defense is going to be lost. If he's in there, maybe that reaffirms if we were leaning Cowboys. Every single Sunday, we're checking, is Sean Lee active? Check that active player list. You're not seeing that in other podcasts where they're making the picks on Tuesdays just off the spread. We're looking at all the numbers. We're looking at the film. We're looking at the guys that are playing to make that determination. And I think that's a large part why we are so successful. Other linebackers, they drafted Leighton Vander Esch. Maybe he can learn under Sean Lee and grow into that role as Sean Lee goes on to bigger and better things. Jalen Smith needs to play up to that expectation. Early draft picked out of Notre Dame. A lot of people thought some big things for him. He could still potentially be a big threat for the Cowboys. Cowboys have all kinds of funny stories here. We already talked about David Irving and his lack of a babysitter. Go ahead to rotoworld.com and check out Byron Jones. His stories are quite interesting. He was a safety. They moved him defensive back to safety, back to defensive back. 2018, he's going to be playing DB. We'll see. They got more youth on the defensive backs. They got Chidobe Awuzie, who remember from Colorado University. The Cowboys overall are the 3rd youngest team. Again, they're relying on all these rookie deals since they have so much dead cap. All this makes them really the perfect landing spot for Earl Thomas. We've seen him in the news. He's not going to be showing up to Seattle Seahawks camp. He's put his house up on the market. He's approached Mark Davis in Las Vegas and asked for him to trade for him. He could shore up that D, become the leader on the defensive side of the ball, and if they add Earl Thomas, it definitely makes them a solid threat in the NFC. Looking at the over-under, the line is set at 8. I think we're looking at over. The Everyone Gets a Trophy podcast is projecting a 9-7 record. Worst case, 8-8, which is going to be a push. Zeke is back. Deontay Thompson could open up that deep ball, and the defense can finish strong, especially if they do add Earl Thomas. So that's the Dallas Cowboys, 9-7 in 2018, strong running. On to the next one. Up next, the Washington Redskins. Ooh, can I say that word? Guys, yeah. Okay, the dog said Redskins is still on the table. All right. The Washington Redskins, 2017, finished 7-9, entering year 5 with Jay Gruden as head coach. That's the longest stint in the Dan Snyder era. The big story here again, quarterback. After spending $44 million the last 2 years on franchise tags just to develop Kirk Cousins for the Minnesota Vikings quarterback position, he left via free agency and the Redskins found themselves without a quarterback. In an offseason with a ton of quarterback movement, the Redskins had plenty of options. They could have bundled a bunch of picks together and traded up in the draft. Unlikely, given what they did for Robert Griffin back in 2012. That didn't work out so well. Maybe they could have sprung for Teddy Bridgewater, a former first-round pick, maybe see if he could return to health. They could have even gambled on half a dozen cheap young veterans, hoping for lightning in a bottle. But before the 2017 season even officially ended, the Washington Redskins reached a deal to trade slot corner Kendall Fuller and a third-round pick in the 2018 draft in exchange for Alex Smith from the Kansas City Chiefs. As I mentioned, management didn't want to make the same mistake using all that draft picks to move up in the draft, but apparently didn't have a problem going back to the well and acquiring a 34-year-old quarterback. You may remember they acquired Don McNabb on his way down at his age 34 season. Alex Smith enters this season 4 years older than Kirk Cousins, a huge difference in this point in their careers. Despite what you see guys like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, maybe even Josh McCown doing last year in 2017, the vast majority of NFL quarterbacks decline sharply in their mid to late 30s, which is why it's puzzling that they opted to guarantee $71 million after they acquired Alex Smith, barely less than what the Minnesota Vikings guaranteed Kirk Cousins at a reported $80 million. Alex Smith does get some weapons, including Chris Thompson out of the backfield. Last season, he caught 39 balls for 510 yards, led the league at plus 67.3% in the DVOA category. Next on that list, Lamar Miller, 42%. So Chris Thompson, 67. Number 2, Lamar Miller, 42. Alex Smith loved to use the backs out of the backfield in KC. He's going to have that same opportunity here in Washington. They also drafted big body Darius Geis from LSU. He's the guy that replaced Leonard Fournette for the Tigers last season. A little flash and dash there. Don't expect to see Fat Rob. Don't expect to see Samari P. getting many carries in 2018. On the outside, continuing to have that revolving door of wide receivers. After they couldn't replace Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon with Terrell Pryor in 2017, they went and brought in Paul Richardson. During Paul's time in Seattle, he became a solid deep threat. Quarterbacks had a rating of 127 on early downs throwing deep to Paul. Fun fact, Alex Smith was the top deep throwing quarterback in the league to a fault back in the day. Then he met Jim Harbaugh. After that, short throwing guy we all know and love, but then last year he started letting it loose again, became very effective. So when you hear people talk about Alex Smith not being able to throw that deep ball, just let them know that once upon a time he could, and he started to find his ways last year. Other receivers, Jamison Crowder will be back in the slot. Josh Doxson enters year 3. It's the time for wide receivers to make that jump. We saw it with Nelson Aguilar last season. Josh Doxson, can he be that guy in year 3 that makes that jump? Overall in 2017, team health was the big issue. Granted, Kirk Cousins played every single game, but after that, 31st in overall team health, including the offensive line just being an absolute shambles. Things were solid on the right side. Guard Brandon Sheff and tackle Morgan Moses played 86 and 95% of Washington's snaps offensively. Through 6 games, the rest of the line looked solid too. Trent Williams, Sean LeVeo, Spencer Long played most of those snaps in those first 6 weeks. The final 10, though, hardly played any at all. To make matters worse, even the guys backing them up were getting injured also. The other big piece missing from the 2017 offense was offensive coordinator Sean McVay. When Sean left for Los Angeles, the Washington Redskins promoted Matt Cavanaugh to offensive coordinator. Here's the scouting report on Cavanaugh. He struggled on third down, and he struggled at adjusting at halftime. When trailing at halftime last season, the Redskins finished 0-7. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, specifically defensive line, 2 words for you people: Roll Tide. 2017 draft pick Jonathan Allen played very well before he got hurt last year, and they went and added in the 2018 draft Daron Payne, an absolute disruptor throughout the college football playoff. If you watched it, you heard his name a lot. You probably wanted him for your team. He lands on the Redskins, should have a nice year. In addition to those two, Matt Iodonis is back at defensive end, should improve the run defensive numbers over last year. Defensive front of the whole, depth. After what they've seen up in Philadelphia, they've added some depth. We've got Preston Smith entering a contract year. They added Parnell McPhee. Ryan Kerrigan will continue to be a disruptor there. Can they replicate what they've seen in Philadelphia and have the rotating bodies on the defensive line attacking the quarterback, taking their chances and blitzing? Defensive coordinator Greg Mininsky is an aggressive blitzer. So with all these resources, hopefully fresh legs can get after the quarterback and make stops on defense. Josh Norman returns back in the secondary. Played average in 2017, but we've seen what he can do specifically back with the Panthers. If he can return to that form, it can only help the Redskins. They signed Orlando Scandrick from Dallas. He's coming off a hand injury. Should be able to play rather well. Fabian Moreau. If you remember in the 2017 draft, Mike Mayock absolutely gushed over this guy. Said he was a first-round talent before he tore his pec muscle on his pro day. He's got the perfect combination of speed, length, ball skills. Mike said ultimately he's just going to need some reps that can lead to success. Did he get those reps in year one? Maybe not. But if he can continue to get on the field, he can only become an elite starting cornerback in the NFL. They also drafted Greg Stroman out of Virginia Tech and used a supplemental draft pick on Adonis Alexander. Both those guys from Virginia Tech. So they added 2 Virginia Tech guys. They love Alabama players on the front line. The scouting isn't branching out much farther than Virginia and Alabama. We'll see how that pays off. DJ Swearinger in the back end should be solid. Monte Nicholson playing at high safety has the talent to make the impact. But again, the key here is going to be that defensive front. With all that depth, can they make the same kind of run the Eagles did in that second year, potentially a 2019 run? Looking at the over-under, it's set at 6.5. Best case scenario, we're looking at a 6-10 season. I think more realistically, 5-11 will be their final record. But again, looking forward, can that defense put them into a winning ways? And can Alex Smith continue playing efficiently as he enters his upper 30s? The New York Football Giants finished 2017 3-13, absolute dumpster fire. The team turned on head coach Ben McAdoo. He's fired mid-season. Off-season, we get wholesale changes top to bottom. Dave Gettleman comes over, formerly of the Carolina Panthers. He's going to bring Mike Shula with him to coordinate that offense. At head coach, they turned to Pat Shurmur, who cashed in on making Case Keenum look so good in 2017. Truth of the matter is, Pat Shurmur's plays may take a little bit too long to develop. Case was great under pressure, extended plays, had the benefit of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs on the other end of that pass, bailing him out time and time again. I'm not sure Eli Manning is that guy to extend plays. Speaking of Eli Manning, he's entering his age 37 season. Arm strength starts to drop off, high 30s. We saw Peyton Manning kind of come to an end. Granted, age 37, he was throwing 55 touchdown passes. However, Eli didn't have the arm strength to begin with. We saw him last year lose his consecutive game streak, got benched for Geno Smith. Obviously, I don't think that's a threat this year to be benched for a backup quarterback. A lot of people may have expected the Giants to use that second overall pick on a quarterback. After the Browns used the first pick on Baker Mayfield, maybe Sam Darnold, maybe Josh Rosen. Giants choose to go a different direction. Saquon Barkley drafted at number 2. Can he fix the Giants' problems on offense? The highlight reel is incredible. He's going to be running the same zone read concepts he saw in college. However, can he be an every down back? He's not going to be able to play that scat back role we saw him so often in Penn State, turning plays for big gains. He's going to need to hit the holes on a more regular basis, kind of pick the hole and hit it. I think you go back and you look at Saquon Barkley as a whole. You see in the bigger games he tended to disappear. He had a 36-yard run against Ohio State, but after that, 20 carries for only 8 yards. In Penn State's other loss against Michigan, another 36-yard run. Outside of that, you're looking at 13 carries for 27 yards. In addition to those 2 games, he was also held to negative yards in the first half against Rutgers and Northwestern. The key here is for Pat Shurmur and the Giants to use Saquon Barkley similar to how they used Jarrett McKinnon on the Vikings last season. Early downs, get him to the outside, screens, passes out there, let him do his thing, be the athlete he is. Gettleman brought over Jonathan Stewart, perhaps maybe a lightning and thunder combo. You go back to the Panthers, they kind of built their team around solid running, solid defense. Now they have these running backs, potentially checking the box for that solid running, turn it over to the defense, let them do their thing. Not too long ago, this Giants defense was great. We loved them 2 years ago when they had DRC in the slot. Once he went down, the Packers took advantage of that and were able to knock the Giants out of the playoffs. But there's a lot of talent there. We'll get to that next. One last note on Saquon Barkley. Looking back, historic rookie running backs who had success. The first one that comes to mind is going to be Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. Largely credit to that offensive line. Made DeMarco Murray a lot of money. Took a year off, didn't have that threat. Got Ezekiel Elliott back there. Boom. Takes over the whole league. Moving on to receivers. The Giants hired Titan Tolbert from the Denver Broncos to coach receivers. They also signed Denver Bronco receiver Cody Latimer. Familiar face for him. The big name here, Odell Beckham. Is he going to be looking for that extension? I don't know. Could he become disruptive in the locker room? I don't know. What I do know is last year in the limited amount of time he did play, he led the league, dropping 14.6% of passes. Granted, the Giants as a team also led the league in drops, but again, due to injuries to Odell Beckham, we saw injuries to Brandon Marshall. Maybe the guys out there on the field weren't the guys they wanted, thus increase in drops. We already mentioned third-year receivers ready to take the jump. Sterling Shepard fits the mold for the Giants this season. Is he going to be able to make that jump we saw Nelson Aguilar make in 2017 and be a solid threat for the New York Giants? Obviously, Evan Ingram returns as tight end. Big-time target in the red zone. Big-time target on short downs. One of the premier tight ends in the NFL. We like him a lot. As I mentioned, we're talking about Saquon Barkley. The offensive line is going to make or break him. The Giants did a lot to improve it. They added Nate Soldier from the New England Patriots and drafted Will Hernandez out of UTEP. In addition to those two acquisitions, they're going to move Flowers back to right tackle where he played at Miami. Looking at this as a whole, solid improvements were made. And you look back to the Jaguars jumping from 2016 to 2017 with the addition of Leonard Fournette, we saw the offensive line be able to move forward and improve their overall play. Maybe that helps the offensive line move forward, opens up the passing game, and the Giants have some magic on offense. Jumping over to defense, James Betcher comes over from the Cardinals. The big change here is he's going to turn things from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4 front, potentially help Olivier Vernon live up to that contract. Moving to the 3-4, they added B.J. Hill out of NC State. Big boy, 6'3", 311 pounds. Good opportunity for him to be that edge player in the 3-4 scheme. Certainly will be able to help create some holes for those linebackers. Speaking of linebackers, B.J. Goodson's still there. They added Alec Ogletree, who, if you listen to talking heads like Colin Cowherd, think he's the greatest linebacker ever. He's solid in the pass, but unfortunately, he guesses the wrong holes, I think, too often against the run. And even when he does guess the right hole, he tends to miss some tackles. He's got Snacks Harrison up front, again, helping create holes. So Snacks Harrison up front, B.J. Hill up front, Goodson and Ogletree can maybe get through and disrupt in the backfield. Going outside, Janoris Jenkins, a very aggressive in man coverage. I think we have a little of a Asante Samuel type player out there. He's going to take his chances, sure, but he also may get burnt. So it's nice to have that aggressive piece over on the outside. You can maybe just trust to do his thing. On the other side, more question marks. Eli Apple's going to return, hopefully be that starting DB. Now, we saw issues with Eli Apple on and off the field last season. Little history on him. He was Eli Woodard in high school, commits to Ohio State, changed his name to Eli Apple, the name of his stepfather, Tim Apple. Fast forward, gets drafted by the Giants. His mom and stepfather are no longer really talking. They ultimately get divorced, not really talking. Family troubles all over at home for Eli. Can he get his head clear? Can he be the type of player he was at Ohio State and be that solid DB opposite of Janoris Jenkins? In addition to those two guys, they signed William Gay, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, to play the slot. We saw he does that rather well, so nice threefold here. A nice trifecta of cornerbacks. Big name. Giants, a couple weeks ago, went in the supplemental draft, used a third-round pick in the 2019 draft to sign Sam Beal. Can he be the biggest supplemental draft pick since Josh Gordon? Oh, as it turns out today, he's going to be out for the season with a shoulder injury. Not ideal. We know Landon Collins is also going to be in that backfield. He's superb. 2016 go back. He was great. Phenomenal talent. If he could be the guy he was back then, I think you're looking at a solid defensive secondary. Even though they're going to be missing Beal, I think Eli Apple can clear his head and become the player we used to see. Taking a look at this over and under. Projected 7 wins. Yikes. I think that's a perfect number, to be quite honest. I think we're looking at a push. Guys like Colin Cowherd are going to make them the dark horse to win the Super Bowl. I think that's a bit of a stretch, especially in a rookie year of a head coach. A lot of questions of, can Eli Manning live up to being a 37-year-old quarterback? He's got the tools around him, but hopefully Saquon Barkley can grow into being a solid tool for Eli. I think that 7 wins is right where we have them. If we go back, we've kind of seen a similar situation happen just down I-95 in Philadelphia. The Eagles hated Chip Kelly, replaced him with the players coach, brought everyone together. Year 2, they're winning the Super Bowl. I think ultimately maybe we could see that same effect in New York. However, jumping all the way to the Super Bowl like Colin Cowherd's going to throw out as a dark horse, maybe not the best idea. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who trashed the Eagles and said they didn't stand a chance against Tom Brady and the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So, can't win them all, Colin. Sorry. That's it for the Giants. That's it for the NFC East. We'll be back with the AFC East, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. Who knows? These injuries keep happening. We got to cut and re-edit. So if you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter at Trophy Podcast. Once again, thank you to super producer Howard at NFL_DVOA_picks. At NFL_DVOA_picks. He's the man, does it all for us, makes it sound so good. Until next time, have a day.